We're talking about central bankers that are running our whole monetary system here. Why is it that they can be so wrong just weeks before we learn about massive collapse?
Just to give people a taste of, to jog their memory of how the 2008 financial crisis, so the last time we went through a really big crisis other than COVID, a real financial crisis. In April of 2007, New Century Financial went bankrupt, and people sort of went, wow, that came out of nowhere. That was unusual. But it got papered over, it got fixed, and things went on. And it took 5 more months before there was some other sort of red flag in the economy, bank runs in England. And then 6 months later, Bear Stearns collapsed. So each one of these was sort of fixed, papered over, government took care of something. And so 6 months later, but then 4 months later, IndyMac and Countrywide financial collapse. And this really starts the ball rolling. 2 months later, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are nationalized. 1 week later, Lehman Brothers. 1 day later. So now we're getting into most people will remember when you woke up and all over the news was Lehman Brothers. And then the next day, AIG. Now, AIG isn't a bank or a brokerage house. That's an insurance company. But it had to get bailed out because of the insurance it was making on derivatives and such. 9 days after that, the largest bank failure in U.S. history, Washington Mutual. And then a month later, Fed's TARP program, and 1 month after that, Citigroup, and 1 month after that, General Motors and Chrysler get bailed out. And 1 month after that, Bank of America gets bailed out. And so these things, I believe that what we saw in March of 2023, March and April, where we had Silicon Valley, Signature, Silvergate, First Republic, and then a few weeks later, there was Credit Suisse, which if that had actually failed, that was a shotgun wedding that the government had arranged between Credit Suisse and UBS, so that the bank wouldn't fail. If it had failed, that would have been much bigger. That was a truly systemic thing. So if they hadn't arranged that merger, we would have seen the entire world financial system freeze up. And when you're running a whole monetary system based on nothing but credit, and that's all the dollars are that exist today, they're all credit. It's most of the currency supply is bank credit. Less than 10% is created by the Federal Reserve, and that's Federal Reserve credit. So J.P. Morgan famously said that gold is money, everything else is credit, and it is true even to today. So this is sort of the way that this played out. If you look at the center of all of these circles, that center corresponds to this time scale. So you can see that there were problems in the banking sector, and then we had IndyMac and Countrywide right here. And then later was Washington Mutual. And it sort of cascaded into all of these banks and then eventually petered out. Well, look at the very first, the center of the circles, again, are the time scale. So you had these things happen first, and then IndyMac and Countrywide, and then this big circle. Look at what has happened already. And if you would put Credit Suisse on this, it would be a circle bigger than the height of this whole entire chart. So we've already seen this giant crack, this tear happen in the global financial system. It's big. And I believe that the rate hikes and it's interesting. You've got a bundle of dynamite and you've got all these fuses and you light all the fuses at once, and it doesn't matter which one gets to the one stick of dynamite first. When it goes off, all the rest of them go off at once, even though their fuses have not burned down to the stick yet. And I think that's what we're saying here, because we've got, commercial real estate, we've got residential real estate, we've got the stock markets, and we've got bonds, and then the entire banking sector is on very unstable ground. The next chart here,
Mike,
This is
before we go on that, I'd just like to ask you a question. If you could just go back to that chart. In your opinion, I mean, when we look at what happened leading up to 2008, Ben Bernanke had said, that the housing market was fine, that the banking industry was fine, and just weeks before. And interestingly enough, I mean, here we are, prior to March of this year, March 12th weekend, when we learn about Silicon Valley Bank. Didn't Powell just testify to Congress that the banking industry was okay? I mean, what am I missing here? I mean, how is it that our central banks, our central bankers, our chairmans of the Federal Reserve, what am I missing here? I mean, at what point are they just not looking at the data? I mean, if I run a business, right, which I do, and you're a smart guy. I mean, you're probably, one of the smartest guys I've ever met. And because you take the time before you say something, you take the time to research it and back up what it is that you're saying, that you truly know what you're talking about. Running a business, I have to look at financial statements. I have to look at comparisons. I'm looking at, my financial statements month to month in comparison to last year and the year before. I'm looking at expenditures. I'm looking at percentages of costs and profits and losses. And, I mean, this is just me running a small real estate brokerage here in the state of Maryland. We're talking about central bankers that are running our whole monetary system here. Why is it that they can be so wrong just weeks before we learn about massive collapse?
Well, there's only two possibilities here. One, they're lying to us. And if they are, it's immoral and they belong in jail. Two, they're incompetent. And that means that they do not belong in their job. So take your choice. Do they belong in jail or do they belong out of their job? Those are the only two possibilities. They're either incompetent or they're lying. Sometimes I think they're incompetent, but most of the time I think they're lying. So whatever they say, I sort of take it and flip it upside down, except their lie works for a little while. But then when it all unravels and the lie is exposed, you see the truth. So to figure out what's really happening, I sort of take whatever they're saying and think the inverse. But then again, you don't know how long that's going to take to become obvious to everybody.